They say the Appalachian Mountains hold secrets older than time itself. I thought I had seen it all. Mark and I had spent years probing into the shadows of the paranormal world. But the mansion changed everything. It started with a call. The voice on the other end was frantic, desperate. "You need to see this place. It's unnatural," they stammered. Normally, I wouldn't take such a vague case, but something in their tone told me this wasn't an exaggeration. The mansion sat alone, buried deep in the woods, shrouded by towering trees and creeping ivy. Its windows, blackened with grime, stared back at us like lifeless eyes. As we stepped out of the car, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds were silent. Mark gave me a reassuring nod as he slung the equipment bag over his shoulder. "Just another haunted house, Jenna," he said with a small smile. I didn't reply. Something about this place made my stomach twist. The air inside was thick and stale, laced with the faint, metallic scent of decay. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and claw marks gouged into the wooden floors. "Dalwyn," Mark muttered, reading a tarnished brass plaque by the front door. This guy was a real piece of work. We split up to set up our equipment: thermal cameras, motion sensors, and EVP recorders. Mark headed to the basement while I made my way upstairs. The wooden staircase groaned under my weight, each step echoing through the hollow mansion. The attic was worse than I imagined, cold and suffocating, with cobwebs draping the low beams like ghostly curtains. As I arranged a camera near an old chest, a faint tapping sound broke the silence. I froze. Tap, tap, tap. It was rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone or something was trying to get my attention. I turned toward the noise, my flashlight landing on a cracked, full-length mirror propped against the wall. The beam reflected my face, pale and wide-eyed. Then I saw it. A figure stood beside me in the reflection, a shadowy silhouette, featureless yet unmistakably human. My breath caught in my throat as I spun around. Nothing, just empty air. "Mark?" I called, my voice shaking. No answer. Panic set in as I clambered down the stairs, the tapping now replaced by faint whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Mark!" I yelled again, louder this time. Still nothing. I found him in the basement, slumped against the damp stone wall. His flashlight lay shattered on the ground, its beam flickering weakly. Surrounding him were shadows, not quite solid, yet not entirely incorporeal. They writhed like smoke, their shapes shifting constantly. "Mark!" I rushed to his side, shaking him. His eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. "Jenna," he mumbled, his voice weak. Then he screamed, a guttural, primal sound that made my skin crawl. I grabbed his arm and hauled him upstairs, the shadows trailing us like hungry predators. The air grew colder with each step, and an unseen force seemed to tug at my legs, slowing me down. By the time we reached the front door, Mark was semi-conscious, and my lungs burned from exertion. I shoved the door open, and we stumbled out into the night. The forest was eerily still, as if the mansion's malevolence had seeped into the surrounding land. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. I slammed the door shut and turned the key, my hands trembling. The engine roared to life, and I sped down the dirt road, not daring to look back. It wasn't until we were miles away that I noticed the deep gash on Mark's back, a jagged wound that oozed dark, viscous blood. "What the hell happened down there?" I demanded, but Mark just shook his head, his face pale and haunted. When we got home, we examined the footage and audio recordings. The camera from the attic showed the mirror scene exactly as I remembered, but the shadowy figure never vanished. It stayed there, motionless, staring at me even as I turned away. The EVP recordings were worse. Whispers, low and guttural, repeated the same phrase over and over. "The sacrifice has begun." Mark never fully recovered. The scratch on his back refused to heal, the skin around it turning a sickly gray. He became withdrawn, plagued by nightmares and paranoia. He swore he could hear whispers in the night, though I never did. We shut down our business a month later. The equipment gathered dust in the garage, and our once cozy home grew cold and lifeless. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear that rhythmic tapping again. Mark says it's just my imagination, but I know better. The mansion isn't done with us. Not yet. The asylum loomed ahead, its jagged silhouette sharp against the pale moonlight. Rusted gates creaked in the wind, their sound echoing like a broken lament. Declan stood beside me, his expression unreadable as he fiddled with the camera. The air was thick, not just with the chill of late autumn, but with a strange weight, something unseen yet undeniably present. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, though his voice lacked its usual bravado. I nodded, clutching my flashlight tightly. My breath misted in front of me, a reminder of the thin veil separating life from whatever lurked here. People have died here, I thought, my stomach tightening. We both knew the asylum's history, a place where the broken minds of yesteryear were sent to be forgotten. Abuse, neglect, even rumored experiments. Those walls had soaked up decades of suffering. Inside, the air was different, heavy, stale. The peeling wallpaper seemed to shift in the beam of my flashlight, almost as if it were breathing. Declan led the way down a corridor lined with broken gurneys and shattered glass. Each step crunched beneath our feet, but it wasn't loud enough to drown out the silence. A silence so deep it felt alive. We set up our equipment in what appeared to be the old infirmary. The windows, now jagged holes, allowed the moonlight to pool unevenly across the floor. Declan set up the spirit box, its static humming like a persistent insect. My job was to document, but my hands trembled as I turned on the recorder. "Is there anyone here with us?" Declan asked, his voice firm. It was a question we'd asked countless times in countless places, but tonight it felt different. At first, there was only the hiss of the spirit box, and then, faint but distinct, a voice crackled through. "Leave now." My breath caught. Declan and I exchanged a glance. His face was pale, but he nodded for me to keep recording. "Why should we leave?" he pressed. The response came quicker this time, sharp and guttural. "Get out." The voice sounded impossibly close, as though the speaker were inches from my ear. A shiver raced down my spine. As we moved deeper into the asylum, the whispers began. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard it clearly. My name, Mia. I froze mid-step, gripping Declan's arm. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" His brow furrowed as he scanned the darkness. Before I could respond, the sound came again, soft, insistent, like a lover's plea. "Mia, come closer." My head whipped around, but there was nothing there. Just shadows. "We need to keep moving," Declan said, though his voice betrayed his unease. We entered a room filled with overturned beds and rusted wheelchairs. The whispers followed us, growing louder. I tried to shake the feeling that they were pulling at me, dragging me towards something I couldn't see. And then I lost Declan. One moment, he was right beside me, and the next he was gone. Panic set in as I called his name, the sound echoing uselessly down the empty corridors. My flashlight flickered, its beam struggling against the oppressive darkness. "Declan!" My voice cracked, but there was no response. I found him in the day room, standing perfectly still in the center of the room. His back was to me, but I could see his lips moving. He was murmuring something, words I couldn't understand. As I approached, I noticed the way his shoulders twitched unnaturally, like a puppet on invisible strings. "Declan," I whispered, my throat dry. "Are you okay?" He turned slowly, his eyes unfocused and glassy. "Mia," he said, but it wasn't his voice. It was layered, distorted, as though someone else were speaking through him. I reached for him, but the moment my hand touched his arm, he let out a guttural scream that sent me stumbling backward. That's when I saw them, the claw marks. 4 deep, angry scratches running down his back, fresh and bleeding. "Something's here," he gasped, clutching at me as though he were drowning. "We have to go. Now!" We ran. The whispers became a cacophony, overlapping voices screaming, laughing, begging. My flashlight finally gave out, plunging us into total darkness. I gripped Declan's hand as we stumbled toward the exit, but the asylum wasn't ready to let us go. The door to the main hall slammed shut in front of us. and no matter how hard we pushed, it wouldn't budge. A cold wind swept through the corridor, carrying with it the stench of decay. My name was screamed from the shadows, louder and angrier now. "Declan, help me!" I cried, throwing my weight against the door. Suddenly, he froze, his grip on my hand loosening. "Mia," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Behind you." I turned, and for a split second I saw it. A figure, tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadows. Its eyes glowed faintly, pinpoints of malice that bored into me. A hand shot out, its fingers impossibly long, reaching for my throat. Somehow I broke free. The door gave way, and we tumbled into the night, gasping for air. The asylum's final act of defiance came as the door slammed shut behind us, nearly catching my leg. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Even then, the sense of dread lingered, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Declan was silent, staring straight ahead as I drove. He didn't speak of what happened that night. Not fully, but I noticed the changes. The way he flinched at shadows, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. Once, I caught him staring into a mirror, murmuring something under his breath. When I touched his shoulder, he turned to me with wide, terrified eyes, as though he didn't recognize me. As for me, I stopped investigating. The asylum taught me a truth I can never unlearn. Some doors are better left closed. Some answers aren't worth the cost. And yet, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. Sometimes in the dead of night, I hear it, the faint whisper of my name, calling me back.